What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. Tonight, we'll be recapping the Steelers' free agency period so far, and we'll do a quick wrap-up of what the rest of the AFC North division is doing. Before we get into that, Shane, how you doing tonight?
I'm feeling pretty good still. There's a couple guys we're going to talk about them still hoping they're back on the team or joining the team this year, but so far so good with free agency.
Yeah, it's hard to complain with
Yeah.
how the Steelers have handled this free agency, considering they've made more moves this year than they have in the last 5 combined, maybe?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've probably put out more money this year than they have the previous 5 years combined, especially new players.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah, for sure. But so the big one that we talked about last episode that we still want to see happen, or at least one of them, was that they brought back Akella Witherspoon
mhm.
with a deal that's pretty much identical to Levi Wallace. So
Yeah.
as of right now, the cornerback room is solid. It's,
Yeah.
they could line up week 1 and be tolerable, but you still want to see them go out and I like either, see if they can swing another big free agent or use a high draft pick at that position.
Yeah, I think that right now we have a group that we could go into week 1 with and not feel undermanned, or at least you have guys that can start.
Mhm.
But adding to that group in one of those 2 ways, I think, is definitely something they still have to do before the season kicks off.
Yeah, because right now they still have about $20.5 million in cap space, which is first of all crazy.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
yeah.
so and based on how they've taken the approach this free agency period, I don't expect them to spend that all in one place.
No.
I expect them to spread that out for 2, maybe even 3 contracts, and then obviously save some for if there's late injuries or whatever. In the training camp or what have you. But in terms of guys who left, so Juju Smith-Schuster is finally out of town. Some people, I'm sure,
Yeah.
are thrilled about that, which is
Yeah,
stupid.
which yeah, whatever,
But he signed a relatively cheap deal with the Kansas City Chiefs, so I think that offense is going to be really special with him now involved
Yeah.
there. He's obviously not the speedy guy, but if Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman are flying down the field, it really allows guys like him and Travis Kelce to wreak havoc underneath.
Yeah, he's the type of receiver that I really feel like they've been wanting and needing in this offense for years now.
I mean, they
That
wanted him last
yeah,
year.
they did, yeah, like, giving them that physical presence that they
Hmm.
don't have outside of Kelsey at
Yeah.
receiver. Because I mean, you have all the speed in the world, and that's great, but that only really matters if you can get the ball in their hands down the field a lot of the time, or in Hill's case, on those quicker routes where you can try to wreak
Yeah.
havoc afterwards. But he gives you the ability to not have to throw the ball 10 plus yards down the field to get 15 yards, to get 10 yards. Because we saw it even in Pittsburgh, consistently getting 5-10 yards after contact sometimes on the shorter routes. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think Juju runs more physically than Travis Kelce does because Kelce
yeah.
pulls a lot more of the stuff that Tyreek Hill does, where he tries to
Oh,
juke
yeah, you're
back
right.
behind
Yeah.
the first down and
When you're
make the
that good
guy
an
miss.
athlete, yeah, he does it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whereas Juju will run through you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think, like you
Knock
said,
people over.
they've been missing that. Um, James Washington also left, heading to Dallas. Where
Expected, yeah.
happy for him. He's
Hmm.
from that area. Des Bryant, another fellow Oklahoma State wide receiver, was recruiting him there basically. And he'll be wide receiver 3 behind CD Lamb and Michael Gallup. So I'm hoping he can have a bigger role with them and have some success.
Yeah, hopefully he can be that downfield threat that he
Hmm.
was occasionally for us when he had the chance to, because that's really what they don't. Like, Gallup is a good down the field receiver, obviously, because he's very physical at the catch point, but it gives you another way to get the ball down the field that you wouldn't have otherwise, especially if they don't
Yeah,
go early with receivers. So
yeah, and then of course we have to talk about the departure of the leading receiver on the team, wide
right,
receiver 1, Ray
right,
McLeod,
yeah,
getting a pretty big bag from the 49ers.
yeah, good contract for him.
Yeah, and if he's kind of their backup Debo Samuel, that's a really good role for him. And then
Oh
obviously their
yeah,
return specialist.
if there's any offense that could find a way to use him more effectively and actually have him matter on offense,
Yeah.
it'd be the 49ers. So yeah, it just gives him another piece to move around with and helps with the returning game. And I think his deal is worth 10 million with incentives if he hits certain things.
I thought it was like 214.
Oh
I think
really?
that was
Okay.
Juju's deal
Oh,
it was
10
up to
million.
10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
But
Ray was like 2 years, 14 million.
right, which that's yeah, really nice payday for him,
Yeah.
and well deserved, honestly, having to fill in last year for
Mhm.
us. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in response to that, the Steelers went out and signed Gunnar Olszewski,
Yeah.
who was the Patriots return specialist for the last few years and was actually an All-Pro in 2020.
Yes.
Um, Don't know how much he's going to contribute as a receiver. Probably, ideally, not as much as Ray, but
Right. Yeah.
he's a really good return specialist. He plays well on special teams when he's not returning. So, that's a valuable guy to have in the building.
Yeah, I think it's really I think he has 9 career catches with the
Yeah.
Patriots, so definitely has not had any offensive impact. But if there's an offense, with us, the way that Canada likes to do stuff, you could see him maybe work in there. But yeah, ideally, primarily a special teams guy. So
Yeah, I really don't want to see him take many more offensive snaps.
yeah, we need him to. Yeah.
Yeah. So the big domino that still has yet to fall, basically for the Steelers, is Terrell Edmonds is still out there. Joe Hayden
Yes.
is as well, but I think he kind of said farewell to Pittsburgh, which I think
Yeah.
that's kind of just how it's going to happen. And then Tyrann Mathieu reportedly signed a deal with the Niners. I saw a tweet about
Yeah.
that, but it's not been confirmed yet. So
Exactly. Yeah. That's a weird situation. I'm waiting to hear more about that. So yeah.
yeah, and it's weird because obviously it's been free agency for basically a week now, but he hasn't signed, so you have to think that his market isn't as strong as people expected. But
Right.
even though the Steelers do have $20 million to throw around, I still just don't really see them going after Matthew.
No, I mean, it would be interesting just because, the back end of that defense would be
Yeah,
disgusting. And then
yeah,
make it you can't deny that. But I think that the still most likely thing is that Edmonds ends up coming back on
yeah.
probably a 2 or 3 year deal for not that much money because it
Hmm.
seems like his market hasn't been good either. And the safety market in general, Marcus Williams getting 14 million per with the Ravens being the high end of it so far is interesting because
Hmm.
the younger player, more perceived upside from this point. Matthew probably wanted more than that. Maybe teams aren't willing to bite on
Yeah,
that.
especially because he's
So
older.
right. So if you could have him for less than that, it would make sense just from that perspective because I'm sure they could make it work with the cap and kind of
Hmm.
have his cap hit lower. But it's still to me more likely that if we do sign a safety, it's just going to be bring Edmonds back.
I totally agree. And with regards to the rest of the market, I think that if Jesse Bates had hit free agency and he wasn't being
Yes.
tagged, he would be getting north of that 14 million.
Oh yeah, he would have reset the market for
I'm
sure.
trying to
Yeah.
find his tag number, which is not super well available on Google, which is a shame.
Yeah. I think it's
It is
13,
12.9 million
12, so
under the
about 13
tag.
million. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would expect him to get like 15 million if he hit the market.
Yeah, I was I felt like he was gonna get, like you said, 4 to 5 years,
Because
75 ish plus.
because
Yeah,
he's a young player too.
yeah.
So
So
yeah, exactly. So with that in mind, the thing that I still want the Steelers to do is free agency, and especially that if they have this much room and they're going to spread it out, I still want to see them get some, just depth players on offense.
yes,
So
yeah,
I've collected some of these names that are still out there. Some of them are bigger than others,
yeah.
and
But
I'm kind of just hoping that they'll do something before the draft, so they don't have to use those picks that are either early or even late. So I've talked about this a lot, but I really want them to find another running back because I'm not
yes,
sure that. I mean, Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland can get the job done as very sparingly used rotational backs, but I want them to get Najee off the field more actually, which sounds crazy,
that's the
but they
problem
need to
with it.
preserve
Yeah,
him a little bit.
exactly. That's the issue with it. Is it's not so much that we don't want to see Najee be the feature back. Obviously, we do. It's that the man had 381 touches as a rookie.
Yeah,
That cannot continue to happen. 300 ish, probably what he's going to be at every year. Just because he can handle it, seems like, and he's the feature back. But
yeah.
you got to find a way to get more productive 60, 70, 80 of those snaps taken away from him with players that actually can make something happen with those snaps.
Yeah, because Benny Snell realistically is like a special teams player,
Yes. Yeah.
almost exclusively. Anthony McFarland just hasn't been able to stay healthy.
Right. We don't know what even to expect from him.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe this year because I know Olszewski is more of a punt returner type, so maybe they'll give McFarland the kick returner job, which
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
think he could be good at that considering how explosively in a straight line he is.
Right.
But the guys that I really like for them to sign would be Ronald Jones the second and Marlon Mack. And neither of these guys are necessarily, your traditional third down, catch the ball to the backfield guys, because Najee's so good at that anyways, but they're both, those early down backs, but I just really like their games that I think, if you want to have a drive, maybe like late in the first where it's like, all right, Najee's had the rock like 10 times already. Let's take him out for this drive, at least for like the first few sets of downs
Mhm.
and, give the ball to one of those two. And Marlon Mack, I really like him. He was one of the first
Yes.
players I scouted for Scouting Academy, and he's had some injuries and then
Yeah,
he's stuck behind
unfortunately.
Jonathan Taylor, but I think you could get him for really cheap because of that. And I think he's a really good back, and he's a home run threat. Like if he hits the hole right and gets going, like he's really hard to stop. really hard to
Yeah,
get.
I loved him whenever he was at his peak with the Colts early
Hmm.
on in his career before the injuries. Like he was a guy that you could rely on to get you the tough yards, especially for a guy that's not very big. Honestly, I think he's what 210ish maybe
He's
at
like
the
six.
most.
He's like 5'11", 210. Like
He's
he's
about
your
210.
average
So
size.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's roughly around this, but he's
Yeah.
a tough run, like you said. He's
Yeah.
tough to bring down once you do get him in open space, which that's something that we don't have right now to back Harris up. That's kind of the key
Yeah.
thing I'm worried about is nobody that's going to create yards for
Hmm.
themselves. They're going to have to basically just hope the offensive line, which
Yeah.
last year they couldn't, get them somewhere to go, whereas being able to create their own space. So he would be great, definitely. Jones is interesting because I think he's more of a speed threat. Definitely, he's
Yeah.
more like a home run hitter in a different way than
Hmm.
Mac is. Whereas less quickness, but straight line speed. If you give him an opportunity to blow through the hole, we saw earlier this year. I think he had like a 90-yard touchdown.
Hmm.
The
He
Bucks, like
has like one or two of those like every
right,
year.
exactly. So an explosive element would be nice to have backing Harris up because that's the one thing that he doesn't have as much of as some other feature backs is the straight line speed. But giving Jones that opportunity to maybe create some of those big plays would be really nice for them.
Yeah, and I think I think both of them will be super undervalued,
Yeah,
just
for
because
sure.
of with injuries, and then with Jones, it's more like he just wasn't used as much because they just kind of
Yeah,
have had weird running back situations
yeah.
there.
Fournette kind of finally worked out for them, so like he
Yeah,
kind of got relegated to the backup role. So yeah.
yeah, and I think now it sounds like Fournette's going to sign with the Patriots. Otherwise, that one kind of intrigued me. But the
Mhm.
market value on Spot Rack is only 2.7 million per
Sounds about
year
right.
for
Yeah.
Jones. So like I feel like they do that in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's easy.
just in case, because I mean they've been willing to move on from the younger guys like pretty quickly once they get into like they moved on from a guy like Antoine Brooks
Yep.
pretty quickly even after he was drafted. They moved on
Hmm.
from Jalen Samuels before his contract was up. So I think either of those. I think they like Snell on his special teams, and but I could see them getting rid of McFarland.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then bring in a guy like Jones. At wide receiver, the first two names I have are the bigger names, but I mean, Julio Jones is on the market now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 6 games you get him for no,
You might as well
it.
take a flyer.
I mean, the whole problem with Jones is like I totally get why the Titans cut him because of the situation with his cap hit and money and everything else, just not playing much last year. But I think it's just about like how much does he actually have left at this point?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I think because like obviously if he's healthy and you get to see him fully healthy, he might still have enough juice to be a legitimate number two, at least kind of option for your
Yeah.
offense. But we haven't really seen that from him in a long time now, realistically.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to probably just focus on signing with a contender and just play it
He's
out.
gonna
See what
let's be
happens.
real. He's gonna sign with the Colts now that they have Matt Ryan.
That would be honestly really fun, just because
Yeah.
they need somebody a receiver more than just Pittman. So that would
Yeah.
be nice for them.
Yeah, and him and
But
Pittman on the outside would be really interesting. Two
yeah, it would.
huge dudes who are
Oh yeah,
great athletes. The other one I have is Will Fuller, and this one, Will Fuller's had a very strange career,
yes, it's been
to
weird.
put it lightly.
Goodness,
Um,
yeah.
but the one thing we've talked about the Steelers needing on defense is getting a guy who can take the top off of defense.
Yes.
And if anybody can do that with speed, it's Will Fuller.
Yes, that's pretty much his whole game, yeah, so
And like, is Mitch Trubisky gonna hit him on 80-yard bombs? No, absolutely not. But like
no, but yeah,
40-yard bombs, maybe.
the whole thing is like, and this is what we've talked about this multiple times, like, no matter who the receiver ends up being, whether it's a free agent initially early on or it is a draft pick right out the gate, somebody who can win down the football field and take that pressure off of a guy like Claypool and Johnson, guys who aren't naturally exposed to doing those types of things right now. Get
Mhm.
that role get somebody in that role who's comfortable doing that and who's shown the ability to do that. That way you can focus on getting the ball in those two's hands and run out catch situations and shorter routes and let them kind of just use their athleticism opposed to having to go down the field all the time.
Yeah, again, and like the reason why like I want to have them bring on one of these weapons is then you don't have to go get it in the draft. You can kind of see who falls to you, and then also if you get that, then you're basically not saying, okay, like no matter what, the ball is going to X player on
Right.
whatever play. Like it's not
Exactly.
automatically assume that it's going to Deontay or it's going to Najee. If you get at least another weapon out there, you can kind of make sure
Force the
defenses
defense to
respect.
play more honestly. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So the next two guys I have are kind of more veteran players, but you're still kind of waiting to hear where they're going to land. It's Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who I think a lot of people expected to get a pretty big deal, but he hasn't been signed yet. And then
Yeah.
Sammy Watkins is just a personal pet project of mine who I
Yeah,
love
Sammy.
because I
Oh,
said
man.
when he was coming out of the draft, I said if he stays healthy, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, which he didn't stay healthy, so I'm not wrong.
Listen, if there's any take that you can fall back on and not usually look too bad in, is saying something like that.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't most times guys that talented, the reason they don't work out at least relatively well is either they get hurt or their situation is terrible or something along those lines. And with Watkins, it's definitely been mostly injuries. He's played pretty well when he's had the chance to stay healthy.
I loved his game coming out of college so much.
He was awesome. I loved him.
I would just be very happy to see him. I don't really know how he fits exactly. Like he's kind of a run after catch guy. But I just like him. And then some lower level guys, these would be on this team now it's wide receiver 3, but definitely a lower tier option. But Chester Rogers, Traquan Smith, who I know you mentioned liking that idea, and then Deshaun Hamilton, who's got cut from the Broncos, and it seems like every year it's gonna be like Deshaun Hamilton's year, and he gets hurt every year. So that'd be another kind of like what I feel like this year's a lot like your Justin Hunters, your
Darius Hayward Bay.
Sorry,
Darius Hayward Bay is another one I like.
Well, he played. He was good for a few years.
He was all right. Yeah, but
Dante Moncrief, they signed one of these guys that just does nothing. But it would be. I think kicking the tires on one of the, like you said, Traquan Smith would be. I think he'd be cool for this team.
Yeah, I think of these like lower tier like guys you could get for really cheap, Smith probably has the most potential to possibly have a role in the offense. Like I've seen him make some really nice plays down the field, especially something again that we really need. So if he's looking for a legitimate opportunity and no one else is really giving him one, I would say give him just a prove it deal, like a 1-year deal, see if he can make anything happen.
I had Zach Pascal on this list, but he just signed with the Eagles a few.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh, that's an interesting move for them. I like that actually.
Yeah, I liked him as like another big slot that blocks really hard and does all the dirty work. I like that a lot, but now he's off the market.
The Eagles need help with receivers.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Good for them. Yeah.
So then I want to talk about tight ends. So again, like Freiermuth is the guy. Obviously, I just want to see if they can upgrade.
Yes.
Zach Gentry. So I have Kyle Rudolph on here again. It's kind of a veteran reclamation project, but he's been one of the most consistent, well-rounded tight ends of the last decade or so. So I don't really see the downside in kicking the tires on him. Although I feel like the Giants cut him, and I feel like it might have been a medical thing. So maybe not the best.
I don't remember if it's medical or money-wise. I think it probably is a little bit of both, but I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah, and then so Blake Jarwin from the Cowboys, who just got cut as well. Another guy who kind of struggled with injuries over the last few years, but would be more of a receiving threat than Gentry is. I think a lot of people were excited about Jarwin potential this year with the Cowboys, but then he got hurt again. And Dalton Schultz kind of took the next step, so they didn't really do much there. And then I wouldn't mind bringing Jesse James back.
There we go. Yeah.
I always thought Jesse James was a good player.
He's fine. He also caught it.
Dude, I was there. He caught it. I was at that game. He caught it.
That's such a bad. Oh my god.
Yeah,
that sucks.
I was at the game. He absolutely caught it.
But
as a tight end too, there's not much better you can do. And then you have, the arguably like one of the tallest tight end rooms in the NFL with him and Zach Gentry. And when Freiermuth is a short guy,
and Freiermuth's like,
he's just
looking up at people.
And then another veteran reclamation project would be Chris Herndon, who
the king himself. The guy is always supposed to be next good fantasy tight end, huh?
Dude, people talk about the way people talk about fantasy tight ends, like talking about very niche cryptocurrencies.
It is because there's 7 guys, and then after that's who cares?
Well, then it's like this guy's value is a tight end 4. I'm like, what kind of leagues are you playing in where you carry 4 tight ends and you need one to be good?
What are you? Yeah, whatever. Yeah,
that annoys me. But I think he'd again be more of a receiving option that could be interesting. Just to kind of kick the tires on, see what they can do with him. And then the other thing where I'd like to see them sign another person is obviously the secondary, which we've talked about a little bit. So. At corner, you still have the big names, Stephon Gilmore, Joe Hayden, Kyle Fuller to some extent. I don't anticipate them doing this because I think even though those guys are all 30 or older, they're all going to cost a good amount of money. I would really like to see if they brought in Kyle Fuller. I think that'd be awesome. He's only 30. He's still a pretty good player, so I would love to see them do that. I just don't think they will.
No, probably not. I think that as far as the last few legitimate day one starting options at corner that are available at this point on the free agent market, I don't see us targeting any of them. Yeah, because I think they feel pretty good about good or bad going into the season with who they have lining up, and just maybe adding to it, like you said, with some depth players or the draft or one of those two. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of how they found Ahkello Witherspoon. So maybe it's a little too much to ask to go dipping at the well again. But two other guys these two guys are pretty similar, Kevin King and Trey Flowers. They're both really tall, really long corners, and I feel like Justin Lane isn't going to survive the preseason, to be
I don't.
honest.
I don't think so either. Not if
So
they
if you
bring
bring
in
in,
any. Yeah.
yeah, I think you bring in a guy who's a little older, more experienced. And again, Kevin King and Trey Flowers aren't world beaters at corner, but
No,
they
Kevin
can
King
succeed on
especially.
they can succeed on special
Yeah.
teams. And like,
Yeah, they'll
if
be
you put
alright.
them in a limited role where they don't have to be the guy, it's like, all right, they can get you 15 snaps a game at the 10 snaps a game.
Yeah. Right.
If you're in against weird personnel, like if a team's in dime and you need him to be your corner four that plays outside when you kick
right.
Sutton and somebody else in, I think he can do that for you. Either
Yeah.
of them. I think, and Trey Flowers, I think the Bengals deployed him as kind of like a tight end stopper. So that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting with that
if you
we
want to
need some help with that.
Yeah, if you want to keep like Edmonds and Minka back in like too high passing situations. And then, like we said, strong safety. Obviously, Terrell Edmonds is the name to know. With $20 million, I can't really imagine a scenario where they can't bring him back.
Yeah, it's gonna just be whether they want to. I think really at this point, like I doubt that there's not going to be an offer out there that is a truly bad one for him. I don't think at this point, because if there was like a really kind of crazy contract, he would have already signed it. You know what I mean?
I agree. So. And like, there's been these kind of things floating around about Juju and the Steelers not wanting to bring him back.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'd be very surprised if the same had happened to Edmonds, because I feel like they just love him in the building. I feel like they're just huge fans of him, more than a lot of actual fans were. So, and Minka's obviously talked about loving playing with him. So on that note of playing with him, I have Ronnie Harrison listed here because the Browns cut him relatively recently.
Mm-hmm.
And Ronnie Harrison is only 24 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want, like, Minka played with him for a good time in Alabama. Obviously, they were extremely successful. And so if you somehow lose out on Edmonds, you can bring in a guy that is a pretty solid safety and has chemistry with your starter. So I think that would be a really good move for them to go after.
Yeah, I think that'd be nice. The thing with him is like he would bring that physical element that we don't want Minka to have to bring again next year.
Yeah.
So that would be nice to have for sure. I see another guy like you said, Landon Collins on here too. Kind of is like a hybrid player, most likely linebacker, safety.
Yeah, if they want to run back the Morgan Burnett,
Mark
Barron experiments.
Mark Barron, yes.
But I don't think they're going to want to do that.
Probably not. But that guy, and then
especially now that you have two linebackers that you feel pretty good about being in coverage. You have Miles Jack and Devin Bush. Like, you're pretty much fine with those guys in pass coverage on third downs.
I forgot that Peppers is still out there, huh?
Yeah, and like obviously he didn't like meet the hype of him coming into the NFL, which was ridiculous anyways. But
yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean he's a good player. Like, he's been pretty solid for the Giants. Like, very quietly a solid safety.
Yeah, he's been really good.
And then Deshaun Elliott, the Ravens let him go. Didn't cut him. His contract expired.
Right, with Williams coming in there now.
Exactly.
Too.
So, but he's always a guy that they played him at free safety. I always saw him as more of a strong safety type.
He is more
for them.
Type, yeah.
But in the Steelers defense where they don't necessarily have that delineation. Well, yeah, they do, but they do a lot more like. It's not like he's just going to be stuck in the box or in single high all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So I think, and that's, kind of a good one to take away, although the Ravens would get a comp pick out of it, I imagine. So, that would.
Yeah, we know.
If they're going to get a comp pick anyway, the Steelers might as well sign him and,
maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But
all right. Any other names that you, in any position that you're kind of looking at that guys
really right now? I don't think so. Like I said, pretty much like we signed a lot of the guys I really cared about, other than Juju. I would have liked to see him come back, just so we don't have to wonder who the third receiver is going to be. If that would have happened. But good for him on that front, getting with Patrick Mahomes. But other than that, not really much going on. Yeah. So listen, I already know the TikTok game is about to get even more ridiculous over there. Good luck to them with dealing with that. Let's all pray for Patrick.
I feel like they just direct all their hate. I think Juju will just be he'll be off to the side. Like, all the hate is already just so focused solely on Jackson, and then
that's true. It might help him.
What's her name, Brittany, to some extent.
God, yeah, that's such a crazy thing. Like, imagine being Patrick Mahomes and having to hear people talk about that the way they do.
It's really with regards to Juju specifically, it was really so stupid because
stupid. 100%.
When he was healthy, he did nothing but produce.
Right.
And never the only time where what he did negatively impacted the team was when he took out Vontaze Burfict, and every Steelers fan would take that in a heartbeat.
There's many Steelers fans who have that as their wallpaper on their phone right now.
Because it's
awesome. I know that
Yeah.
they're, and rightfully so, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't understand the narrative around him the whole time he was here. My friends and I, especially, like I've mentioned this before, like
Yeah.
we cannot fathom how people are like, yeah, he's not a steal. I'm like, whatever, dude. Okay,
Yeah.
just
That
move
just
on.
always rubbed me the wrong way. And now I have
Yeah,
another jersey that's going to waste.
right. Yeah, every time.
All right. So let's whip around the AFC North.
Yep.
I think we'll go from least controversial to most controversial in order of
Fair,
teams.
fair. I think we know who's going to be last though.
Yeah.
So let's go. Yeah.
So let's start off with the Ravens, our friendly royalty rival in the division, I
Sure.
would say.
Yeah.
Relatively quiet offseason for them, as per usual, basically. They brought in Marcus Williams and Morgan Moses. Like you said, Marcus Williams gets a huge deal to be their new free safety. Morgan Moses is going to be their right tackle. Both really good signings. They also brought back Michael Pierce from the Vikings to be the nose tackle. And they brought back Za'Darius Smith for like a day. And then
Yeah, I don't know
he
what.
went back on that.
You still haven't heard anything about what that was about. I don't know
Mm.
if like something weird going on with the contract, or maybe there was a deal in place and he had second thoughts. Something happened there, but we'll see what they do there if they do address that position at all. But
Yeah, so they'll still need to go after edge in the draft, and like they'll probably get a comp pick from this signing somehow.
yes,
They
somehow, yeah,
signed a guy and then lost a guy, so they'll be, oh yeah, that's a fifth round comp pick. Even though he never
somehow,
played for
yeah.
you.
I
um,
somehow,
yeah, so I mean, I anticipate them taking edge early in the draft. It's a good edge class.
yes,
And then they need to find some more weapons for Lamar. Getting another, we say this every year, getting him a wide receiver that's actually good. Who can actually catch the ball. And then they
gosh,
need another tight end. They let most of their guys go besides Mark Andrews and Patrick Ricard, who they've re-signed to a pretty big deal. And then, I mean, their secondary is still really good. Their defensive front is pretty solid now that they brought Pierce back. And their inside linebackers are okay, and I think that they're pretty solid across the board.
yeah. It feels like the Marcus Williams deal definitely screams to me like we need to have a way to stop the Bengals offense, right?
That's a good point.
That's I
Yeah.
think that deal is almost entirely predicated on the fact that just the AFC in general now the way it's going, but also the division.
Mhm.
Granted, this is before another quarterback joined that we'll talk about later, but
Yeah.
Burrow and the
Mitchell
explosive
Trubisky.
plays,
Yeah, we know.
right? Of course, yeah, the explosive play element that we saw from Bengals last year, something that they know they have to find a way to counter, and it did not work for them last year with injuries and
Yeah.
other things. So
Yeah, that's
I
a
think that's
really
a big
good
part of it.
point.
Yeah.
And I mean, and again, like they're going to get so many guys back healthy this
Yes.
year with Marlon Humphrey,
100%.
Marcus Peters. They're going to be so much better across the board.
Yes.
So
100%.
typical offseason for them. They're just going to build great draft picks and all that. Bengals quiet relative to last season,
Hmm.
but they used like the Steelers. They used their free agency to rebuild the offensive line.
Yes.
Got
Yeah.
Alex Kappa from the Bucks. They got Ted Karras from the Dolphins. They just signed La'el Collins from the Cowboys, which is a big deal. So they
Yes.
pretty much revamped their entire right side of their offensive line. They probably still need a left guard unless they want to keep trying out Jackson Carman, which I wouldn't hate. I liked Carman I like Jackson Carman more than a lot of people did last year.
Hmm.
And then as a guard, I think he can be solid there. He just needs some time. And then they also brought in Hayden Hurst from the Falcons. And like we said, they tagged Jesse Bates. They let CJ Uzoma and they cut Trey Waynes today. So, I think they're again trying to kind of keep things status quo, not trying to rock the boat too much from last year. I think they're really going to try to get Jesse Bates signed.
Yeah.
He's probably their best defensive player, but I think they probably still need another corner. They brought back Eli Apple for what it's worth.
Oh yeah, good for them, right? You need to
Yeah.
have that guy. Uh, for me, like this offseason was similar to what the Steelers were trying to do, right? They wanted to make sure that the offensive line was not holding this team back,
Mhm.
right? And granted, it didn't really hold them back most of last year because of how explosive they were, but it
They
kind
were
of all came to
miraculously able to overcome it.
exactly. It was not this. It's not sustainable to be able to do
Yeah.
that, right? I mean, it did finally come back to bite them in the Super Bowl too. So
And they probably shouldn't have made it out of the divisional round where you
no,
got
they.
sacked
I mean,
nine times.
that Titans game. Ryan Tannehill is, probably just as responsible for that
Yeah.
game as the Bengals are. I was not trying to say anything negative about him, but like that was a brutal performance by him on that. So, yeah, they really those three guys they signed, right? They make it a competent offensive line most likely, right?
Yeah.
You have three legitimate upgrades at that position, especially again the interior and then right tackle. Collins should be an upgrade over what they got from Reef.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Carmen, if he comes along, maybe playing with better players this year helps him a
And
lot.
just having that. I mean, like if left guard is your weak spot, that's pretty much fine.
That's doable. Yeah.
And then if it's like a league average, slightly below average player, and that's your worst player, that's more than fine. Like you can get by with that.
Right. You can make it work, especially if you're upgrading, like you said, the other 3 spots along the line. So really, they did a good job making sure that Burrow's not going to look at this offseason and go, man, they didn't try to save my life. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's literally, honestly, at this point, especially considering the contracts are getting thrown around for quarterbacks right now, you have to make sure this guy wants to be here long term. And doing stuff like this should allow them to have some good faith come the time, whenever that needs to be taken care
I mean,
of.
that'll be next offseason, basically.
Yeah, that's when they probably start hearing conversations about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that'll be really interesting because of the contract given out to the next guy. Um,
Yeah.
so the Cleveland Browns,
They did some stuff, huh?
yeah, they did. They cut a lot of players. They
They
got rid of
did.
Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, J.C. Treader, Jadeveon Clowney, Malik Jackson, and Ronnie Harrison. And they brought in Jakeem Grant, Jacoby Brissett, and Taven Bryan. So, it's a lot of kind of restructuring the roster around Baker Mayfield, just kind of
Right. Around
recycling in
Baker
some
Mayfield.
guys.
Yeah.
And then they trade a bunch of stuff for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, a bunch of
After
stuff.
being initially rebuffed by him
Yeah.
and Baker Mayfield asking for a trade, then they get back in on Deshaun Watson, offer him the world
The world.
in
Yeah.
terms of draft picks and guaranteed money, and now he's their quarterback.
And the thing that's the most surprising for me is not the fact that they went this route, because Browns, they're, especially with what they're trying to do right now, they're trying to maximize the window they've created with a pretty talented roster overall,
Yeah.
right? And Mayfield had a down year due to injury and other things. So them wanting to try to upgrade in itself is fine, right?
Mhm.
But they gave a guy who they don't even know what the suspension is going to look like next year,
Let's say, I
and
mean,
has
minimum 6 games. Yeah, 'cause
minimum
that's what
6
Ben
games,
Roethlisberger
right?
initially got, and
Exactly.
then was reduced to 4. So
I'm
minimum 6 games.
imagine minimum, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm expecting somewhere around 10, honestly.
I think 8 is. I think for
Yeah,
him,
8 to 10,
8.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So he's gonna miss, at least a good chunk of next year. And there's the civil suits to still deal with, the overall arching conversation around him you have to deal with. But then you give him the Kirk Cousins supermax.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, that Kirk Cousins guarantee
Yeah.
deal, let's double that.
$200 guaranteed.
230 million, and then you amend the contract in a way where if he does get suspended, he loses the minimum amount of money he basically can lose,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a slap in the face to literally the entire NFL contractually, because now teams are going to be able to, like free agents and incumbent quarterbacks right now that are already looking for new deals, they're going to be able to go to their agents will be able to go to teams and say, hey, this guy who
Yeah.
didn't play football for a year and has one of the most ridiculous cases against him that any players ever face while playing in the NFL.
Yep. Probably the worst since Michael Vick, I would
Exactly.
say. Or,
At
well,
least.
Aaron Hernandez.
Well, yeah,
And Ray
but
Rice.
he's like such a special case. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're going to give him a guaranteed $230 million contract when he already was under contract from the
I mean, he already
previous
had
deal
like
that he signed.
he already had like one of the most expensive quarterback contracts in the NFL.
Exactly. It's not even that they had to give him a new deal as part of this, or else he wouldn't be there long. Like he already had a deal in place.
Mm-hmm.
It completely shifts the entire landscape. And this is something I heard on, I think I was watching like some clips of the Rich Eisen show, and one of people came on and was talking about like one of the things that the league and some other teams are most mad about with them is not that they did this and made the Deshaun Watson move, but the way that they did it with this contract. It completely throws off the structure of quarterback deals in a way that we have never seen in the NFL. Like this type of deal just does not exist in the NFL. Even in a minor case, you're looking at, like I said, Kirk Cousins deal, right? Yeah, that was a fully guaranteed contract, but it was a 3-year deal at the time, and it was way less money than this is.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy from top to bottom, this entire saga with him and this trade.
Yeah, and we're not going to throw stones at the Browns fans about it, because we don't really have any room to do so.
No, we don't.
I just didn't want the Steelers to do it for that reason, because
we talked
I didn't
about
want to
that.
go through it again of having to defend a quarterback with this kind of record. That's why I didn't want them to trade for him. And also, again, you brought up they have a competitive roster. Like this was, aside from Baker Mayfield, and they had some injuries as well, but that was a playoff caliber roster.
Absolutely.
That the Browns had last year. And that, like in terms of just the parameters of the trade, who is acquired in a vacuum, I don't think it's that terrible of a deal.
No, if
you're only giving up
only
like 3 first rounders, that's a big deal. But like the Browns don't necessarily need those picks because their roster is already quite good.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you need to reload at wide receiver, but you can do that with late round picks. Your offensive line's pretty good. You might need to do some retooling with some of the guys, heading out in free agency, obviously getting rid of a guy like JC Treader. You have your premier pass rush. You have a really good secondary. You just kind of have to rebuild your defensive line and linebackers, which you can do with later round picks. So I don't hate that deal for them. It's just, like you said, like just this whole situation is crazy. And to keep it to football, I have a take, and I'm not sure how much I believe it, but
Okay.
Deshaun Watson might be the third best quarterback in the division.
I think he is right now.
Really? You think he's worse than
So,
Lamar?
so right now, so again, you have to take into consideration he's going to a new team, a team that right now at least doesn't really have any truly established weapons outside of,
Sure.
if you want to say, and Njoku's been pretty good, like film wise, his numbers haven't been great, but he should be good at tight end. Peoples Jones has flashed, but you don't know exactly what you're
Same
getting out
with
of
Anthony
him.
Schwartz.
Right, like he's a speed threat, great.
They have Amari Cooper.
But I've kind of
they're
forgot
going to
about
they're
him.
all new to each other for sure.
Yeah, I didn't think about him for at first, but again, he's a good fit for what Stefanski wants to do. But there's no guarantee that they aren't, especially right now. There's no guarantee that he's going to outproduce, or especially just being able to beat out the Ravens and the Bengals for this division right now.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to play for at least part of the season, and you're going to be on the back end of that trying to get things going before that. It's just you don't know what you're going to get out of him, even really the first 2 years, realistically.
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, Watson is better than Lamar as a football player. But I think in the context of their offenses and their teams,
right,
Lamar's is better positioned right now because the offense is
for sure.
And that's part of the issue is like the offense is super catered towards Lamar and his skill set, which some of it's limited, but some of it was also the design of the offense.
Yes, I think so.
So that's interesting, but I think you can make the argument that Watson is the third best quarterback in the division, or at least has the third best situation.
I think that's a better way to phrase it. Is he's likely of the 4 teams, his team is third in terms of like setting up to win right now.
Yeah,
that's where I would put them at right now.
Right. So I think that brings us to this discussion, which I think is an interesting one that we should have. Is that I think it's pretty clear the Steelers are right now they're looking up at the rest of this division in terms of quarterback play, how they're going to finish, upside, what have you. And I don't think that trading a ton of assets for one of the premier quarterbacks that was quote unquote available this offseason, your Rodgerses, your Wilsons, and your Watsons, I don't think that trading a ton of assets would have changed the team's outlook.
I don't think so either. And honestly, I question a little bit. And as much as it has a chance to work out for them, with the way the AFC is right now, the Browns haven't guaranteed themselves anything by doing this, in my opinion. They haven't guaranteed anything other than they're going to be more competitive, assuming Watson's on the field and healthy and playing well, than they would with Mayfield, obviously. But they haven't guaranteed that they can win the division. They haven't guaranteed that they can get a relatively high seed in the playoffs. They've guaranteed none of that by making this move, especially the next really 2 years, like I said, because the first year you're expecting to miss part of the year with him, and then the second year is going to be his first full, let's really get going year, which you don't know what that's going to look like until you get a chance to bring in some players at key positions, like you said, receiver, linebacker, that they don't have right now. It's a big risk for what I think might not be a good chance at paying off with an actual championship, because that's the only way this deal gets looked back on really favorably down the road, is if they win a championship with him on the roster, right? I don't know how
I think you can make the argument. I think if they make multiple deep playoff runs, I think it's fine.
Yeah, they'll be able to say it was successful, but
right
when you look at the optics of the situation, the guaranteed contracts, you look at the assets given up, you could make an argument as a Browns fan or a fan of the NFL in general that had the Browns played it safer, not even safer, but just played it out by trusting their draft and trusting they can find somebody without having to commit so much money to them, would they have maybe been able to have a similar level of success without him?
Yeah,
that's the conversation that's going to happen if they don't win at least a championship at some point during this time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's a lot to gamble. It is.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not upset that they decided to go this Trubisky route. And you know, I think I'm generally in favor of them building this team slowly, because trading everything to try to win this year, or even win the next 3 years, is it's tough, because you're going to set back your team's development long term. Not to mention, like you said, I'm not advocating for tanking or throwing in the towel, but selling the farm to try to win now, when grant like Mahomes and Will and Allen are on their big deals, but the rest and Watson, but Lamar and Herbert and Burrow are all on their rookie deals. Like those teams are going to be the best position they can to succeed now. If you let's say wait until next year to, and the Steelers could still draft a quarterback in the first round.
They still could, yeah.
But if they don't and they wait until next year or maybe even the year after,
right,
those guys will eventually be forced into their later term. I don't think the Steelers are operating this galaxy brain way.
No, I don't think so either.
But I'm just saying, I don't see necessity to the opportunity is not the AFC is not there for the taking now.
It's not.
It is not in a good place to try to take it. You need to build up this team, build up the defense, rebuild the offensive line, get a good offensive system in place, and that might not happen this year on the offensive part. But if if this year does kind of go down the drain, it's not that big of a deal because selling the farm to try to win now, you were going to need to sell the farm at a pretty bad rate to get to a point where you would be really competing for the conference. You know what I mean?
That's the problem with this, right? And one of the reasons, again, what the Browns did, it could pay off, obviously, but getting into the arms race at the point that it was, where Denver goes and gets Wilson, Herbert gets a ton of help on defense and offense through free agency with what the Chargers did. Mahomes is still there, obviously, with the Chiefs. That team isn't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The Raiders of all teams, even they go out and make a big splash with Adams. So many teams said, you know what, we're getting into this race.
Yeah.
And by the time that we got to the start of actual free agency, and by the time this Watson trade happened, to me, it didn't make any sense to enter this race when you don't have any guarantee. I mean, they don't even have a guarantee of making the playoffs with how good some of these AFC teams are. Realistically. The entire AFC West next year is going to be projected as possible playoff teams, the entire division.
Yeah.
So it's just hard. The Steelers, what they need to do and what they are doing, it seems like, is they need to take this year to evaluate the roster, figure out, who's going to be here long-term fully, try to see if Canada's the guy for the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And, what they've done, I think, gives him a fair opportunity to show that, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you said, you make your decision of quarterback. Maybe it does come this year. If they really love somebody and he's there, maybe it comes next year. But you need to figure out what direction you want to go for the next few years while everyone else is duking it out for right now.
Yeah, you can this is the time to be patient. This is the time to let the war of attrition take place elsewhere and kind of rebuild your forces basically to figure out how you're going to win this in the long run, because that's how the Steelers operate always, like it or not, they operate with a long-term vision of consistently competing in the playoffs. And so that's why they're not going to tank. That's why they're not going to sell the farm to win this year. They're going to say, okay, and I think that, I think making the playoffs with this roster, I think it's possible.
It is possible. They're going to be better than last year. They're a better roster.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, granted, the AFC is also a lot better, but
yeah,
it's just, again, we're not as bad of a spot as many people like to think, simply because we have key elite players at certain positions still on defense, especially. Mm-hmm. Our defense is going to be better than it was last year, just especially from a rush defense perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to be as bad as we were last year. Barring some other worldly collapse as far as injuries again or anything like that, which again, you don't usually see consistently. They're going to be really tough to beat on that end of the ball. And the offense it has to be better. It can't possibly get worse. We know that.
If you're not going to be good, be weird. And I think
they'll have the opportunity to do that. They will have the opportunity to mess around. And I think that going into the season with that mentality of no one thinks we can even get out of fourth place in this division. Nobody thinks
that's somewhere where Mike Tomlin excels.
Yes, exactly. Nobody believes that we can actually get this thing done. I think they're going to be better than the Browns next year, especially with Watson's suspension factoring. And I do not trust Brissett to keep this team in a good position for 6-8 games, whatever it's going to be. The Ravens have to get healthy, and I'm sure they will, and they're going to be tough out, but we play them very well.
Yeah.
Especially playing Lamar well.
I don't think they'll sweep the Ravens again next year.
No, it's hard to say that for sure.
I feel like it'd be tough to sweep the Browns. Even if they if they go 3-3 in the division,
that's fine.
Yeah. And then
100%.
Unfortunately they're gonna draw the oh no, they were a wild card team. Okay, so they get was it like the second best team in every other division?
I think something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's going to be tough with the AFC West. And then the AFC South and the AFC East are pretty weak. I guess they'll get the Patriots again. Great, every time.
Yeah. It's just, again, I think that we're going to be.
They get the NFC South this year,
yes,
which is terrible aside from the Bucks. So
yeah, which we do play the Bucks, but that's
yeah, of course. I mean, it's Tom Brady. It's a loss. It is.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, good job for him, by the way. Good luck to your NFC opponents you have to face with Packers and I don't know, maybe the Cardinals.
Cowboys.
I mean, even those two, it's like, man, I trust them so little that
the Rams, well,
yeah,
defending Super Bowl champions.
Obviously, the Rams are like, it's going to come down. I feel like realistically, if it doesn't come down to Packers / Rams / Bucks, it's because something weird happened.
Yeah, because like the Cowboys took a step back, the Cardinals are kind of where they are. The Rams took a step back. The Seahawks took a major step back.
Yeah, Seahawks don't exist in my opinion right now.
The Seahawks are completely
if they trot Drew Lock out there next year, oh my goodness, that's going to be fun.
Where do you think Baker ends up now that Indianapolis is off the table?
I would have said maybe Saints, but they went Winston.
Yep,
they were back with him.
There's really not a lot of spots.
Like the Falcons signed Mariota.
It's pretty much Detroit Panthers, or Seattle at this point.
To me, I think the Panthers could still do it. If they
that's a good point. Somebody. Yeah,
if they don't want to take somebody that high at 6, if they would rather, because we can all say, I think that assuming Mayfield's fully healthy, he's at least better than Sam Darnold.
Yeah, people like to clown on Baker, and kind of the same way they like to clown Trubisky, but like. Baker is a solid starting quarterback.
Yeah, he is bad.
No, he's a starting NFL quarterback for sure. Like
right.
Yeah.
So like if they want to at least guarantee pretty much that they're better at quarterback.
Honestly, if the Panthers can get some offensive line help in the draft and you put Baker Mayfield on that roster,
he'll be all right.
Could be a wild card team.
Yeah, he'll do it, especially in the NFC right
Yeah, exactly.
Now. Yeah. You don't have a lot of competition.
You only have to be like the 10th best team in the conference. They could absolutely do that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or no.
7th,
the 8th best team, or 8th or 7th best team in the conference. Like you can do it, no problem.
You know, this is something we'll probably talk about later on in the season. But like once the drafts are, especially like once the season starts, how many teams in the AFC do you think you take before, like out of the top 14 teams in the league, right? So the seven on each side. How many of them would be AFC teams? You think?
Yeah, this is a good concept, but we're not going to do it today.
Yeah, we're not going to get into that. Like that's something we need to talk about.
That's a good concept. We'll do that on another show because
it's rough for the NFC.
Yeah, we're running pretty long right now. Thank you for tuning in. Shane, let the people know they can find you and your work.
Find me at Shane Kubis on Twitter and at SteelersATB as well on Twitter. Follow us there and just look out for any Steelers related content from around the block in general.
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Make sure you're following us there. Make sure you're following Around the Block on Twitter, on YouTube, on Twitch, and all those platforms. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.